Hi there everyone, it's Ashley Murphy, founder and principal of Arete Wealth Strategists, and I just wanted to run you through what you should consider doing to adjust your personal finances for a recession, as it is highly likely that there is one coming. This is actually a blog piece, so you can go to Arete Wealth Strategists -WA, arete-wa.com and see the blog post there. It's also coming out on our newsletter that I'm going to send out a little later. But essentially, the first thing to keep in mind is recessions are inevitable. I pay very little heed to those that say that they can predict these things. No one could see a year ago a pandemic coming. Impossible. But mark my words, a few years from now, people will be saying that they saw this one coming. Because a broken clock is still right twice a day, and the perma-bears that are always talking about the next downturn will surely be talking about that. First thing to do in preparing your finances for a recession will be to identify your emergency fund and what funds you can access over and above a specific dedicated emergency fund. So the general rule of thumb for an emergency fund is 3 months of living expenses per working member of the household. I would reference Dr. Osterholm here, who is the infectious diseases expert and director of the Center for Infectious Diseases. I've included a link here on the PDF that goes to the interview he had with Joe Rogan, and I'm just getting through his book to do with how these pandemics unfold, but playing it conservatively, as he would suggest. Let's think about 6 months for this pandemic to make its way through. For someone that is in a field that is particularly exposed to this social distancing, they may consider expanding and extending that emergency fund a little bit further. So identifying your emergency fund, clients of mine will have that segregated. That will be clearly understood. They may have invested that in one of two ways. It's either just going to be liquid cash, or what I've called the 130% defensive allocation. And that has succeeded in keeping up with market gains historically, and now that's going to be tested. But thankfully, when reviewing the performance of that model, to yesterday, it was actually still up 8% over the year. So invested very conservatively, but nevertheless is subject to the declines that we've seen in the broader market. Don't forget, most importantly, you do not want to invade those investment funds that are already dedicated to a particular long-term goal, unless, of course, absolutely necessary. And if necessary, also keep in mind, you can go to your Roth IRAs and take the initial contribution, not the growth that you may have achieved, hopefully you still have achieved on that account, but rather the initial contribution, you could take that out tax and penalty free at any point in time. It would also be a prudent time to consider what other lines of credit you might be able to access. So from a bank, from your primary mortgage for a line of credit, or if you're over the age of 62, you might be able to access a reverse mortgage. Or indeed, a third category would be the cash value in a life insurance policy. These assets are referred to as buffer assets in the literature. They are relatively low-cost interest sources where you can go to get the additional capital to get you through a period like now, where we know that a recovery is inevitable. The last thing we want to do is turn a paper loss into a permanent loss. Second point here is to do with your budget. Of course, clients of mine will absolutely have a budget defined. Now might be the time to go through, blow any dust that's accumulated on there, blow any dust or any accumulated lifestyle inflation. You know, things may have crept up a little bit, more dining out, more subscriptions to this and that. See if you can go through and clean that up a little bit, and prepare not to go overboard here, but to consider doing a doomsday budget. You know, so what would happen if unemployment did strike? How could you cut? How would your lifestyle change? What are all the things that you can get rid of? And of course, make sure you're getting the best deals possible for the goods and services that you are partaking in. So wouldn't hurt to go through and review all your digital subscriptions. Very easy to accumulate over time, and not be mindful of what you're actually paying for, as well as your cable, magazine, a digital magazine most likely, subscriptions and insurance services. I've also been very proactive in working with clients to make sure that the insurance that they do have is with the best providers and is appropriate to their needs. So you'll want to make sure that you do that as well. Next, third, debt. Pay off any high interest debt that you've got. I'm thinking specifically of credit card debt or private student loans that are less likely perhaps to go into deferment with this current downturn. Seek also, as the weeks unfold, there's another article in today's newsletter about this, but seek to refinance your mortgage. The Fed has lowered the federal funds rate now down to close to 0 to 0.25, and there's been a program initiated to clear the backlog of what's holding up the ability of banks to really offer those lower rates. So we should see those rates come down in the next couple of weeks. Fourth, to do with investing, make sure your excess cash is readily able to be deployed. When the correction comes, it's going to be sudden and it's going to be violent. And if you've been talking to your friends about how you're going to be positioned, what you're going to buy, you're going to miss out, because where you need to be right now is have an account opened and funded with cash ready to go, because if it requires an ACH transfer, you just lost 3 days. And we've seen over the past 10 days in particular just how volatile the market can be, up 6% in a day or down even 12% as we experienced on Monday of this week. So pay attention to the financial news, do your own research, and really understand the true magnitude of what's gone on. So we've had record volatility, never been greater volatility in the history of the VIX. We've had one of the most severe in history one-day declines, but in absolute numbers, the percentage decline that we've experienced thus far has not been that bad. It's actually been around 28 to 30%. I haven't looked at the closing numbers as of today, but should be right around that range, which only puts us back, it's terrible to say, but it really only puts us back 3 years thus far. What's the best way to prepare your portfolio if you're thinking there could be further losses? It's to set your strategy, understand your strategy, and stick with it. I explain to clients and prospective clients the investment approach that we follow is one where we believe that you set a strategy. You set a course that you're going to follow for a particular goal and leave a little bit of slack in the sail in order to veer where there are opportunities that might exist. And we're partaking in those opportunities right now by rebalancing and having originally chosen the specific securities that we're invested in based on a more defensive and risk mitigating strategy. Next, fourth point here is to invest in yourself. Don't forget, one of the assets that will always have a positive return on investment is investing in your human capital. So make sure to keep your skills up to date as you contemplate the next step in your career. Next, don't be afraid of one-to-one networking. That doesn't necessarily have to be in person. Of course, that gets a bit difficult in times like this. I was just joking with someone earlier today that I think there's two things we're going to look back on in this period and be very pleased to see changes from. One will be corporate America will now be much more set up to work remotely. And the second thing is people might rediscover some social skills and how to use the phone. I don't think text messages, Slack, or those instant messaging services really offer the same kind of connection, as weak as it may be, to a personal one-to-one, sit down face-to-face, but people are going to rediscover the value of using the phone and Zoom and Google Hangouts and Skype and so forth. Next, this one comes as a bit of a surprise perhaps, but I put household maintenance on the list, prompted by an article that I saw in the Wall Street Journal in October of last year when a retiree wrote in and he asked, what are the expenses that I'm not considering that I really should as part of retirement? And the excellent article there referenced a report from the Society of Actuaries where they noted that the number one spending shock that happens in retirement, and it could happen at any age, doesn't just have to be retirement, there's no reason this couldn't be a shock right now, is to do with household maintenance. You know, what to do if the roof caves in, or what to do if there's a flooding in the basement or whatever. So I would encourage you to stay on top of your household maintenance and look, as I did and encourage clients to do. Perhaps your utility provider offers some sort of appliance repair / replacement program where they could help you out with the parts, labor, and preventative maintenance of your HVAC systems, as well as general appliances. Lo and behold, where I happen to live, Excel also includes plumbing and sewer lines as well as part of that program. So I'm very pleased with that protection. $60 a month. I think that's going to be a very, very good investment for avoiding surprise expenses. Another one of which is think about just how much assistance you really could offer a family member without risking your own financial future. Next, behavioral biases. I'm encountering this on a daily basis with clients that have a strong action bias, and that's the name of this particular behavioral bias that I'm referring to. It's an action bias, and that is there's a tendency to want to do something, even if that something is either ineffective or counterproductive. People say, I don't want to see the market's decline. There's got to be something we could do. Well, it's a little bit like juggling with knives. You know, if we go to grab something, it could be nasty, it could be bloody. And so I refer back to that earlier point about we've set strategic goals, we've set time frames, we haven't invested with short time frames in mind to begin with. This is going to be a temporary setback. May take a little while. I'm not going to put a timeline in there exactly for how long we expect for this recovery to take place. But please consider, 1 month ago we had 50-year lows unemployment. We had all-time highs in the market. So the fundamentals are good, and we might be in for a bit of a shock. But I hope this has been a useful video in helping you think about how you might modify your personal financial situation to weather this coming downturn. Thank you very much, and if this has been of value to you and you'd appreciate a conversation with me, then please feel free to click the Contact Us button on my website. Thank you very much.